And then start recording. Okay, so you can turn that on. Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our 33rd session in our Nectar of Devotion seminar, and it is our second to last. What a shame, but don't worry, in about a week or a little more than a week, we are going to start with the Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Shastri seminar. Oh yes, we're going to do in-depth study of Bhagavad Gita, really. It's going to be quite something. All right, so here we are then, and let us begin, as usual, by chanting our dedication to the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. Nana Shastra Vicharanai Kanipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padaravenda Bhajana Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Ragoyago Sri Jiva Gopalako Vande Rupa Sanatana Ragoyago Sri Jiva Gopalako. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the 6 Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the 3 worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they're absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Hare Krishna. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presta Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Anant Guru Vaishnav Vrinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Bhakti Churu Swami Maharaj ki. Hare Krishna. Yes, so very good. We are going now to focus on Nectar of Devotion, Chapter 18. Chapter 18. The character of one in ecstatic love, or bhava. Yes. So, well, characteristics, qualities, symptoms, how you can recognize These are the basic ideas, really, how to understand if someone is on the level of bhava. So we have mentioned, and we read at least one verse yesterday, and we've mentioned on a couple of occasions last night about a person on the level of bhava displaying different emotional symptoms. Yes, in fact, bhava means ecstasy, which generally indicates something emotional. And there are different types of ecstasies on this level of bhava. And depending on how we do in terms of time this evening, we will just briefly touch on those different types of ecstasies which come to a person on the level of bhava and then gradually increase until on the level of prema they're just kind of like all-consuming, you could say. So we did mention, though, a couple, like we read that verse, if you recall, about if your heart is steel-framed. Do you remember that verse from last night? If a person has a steel-framed heart, then when they chant the holy names, tears will not come from their eyes, and their bodies will not shiver, their hairs will not stand on end. These different types of things will not happen because these are, you could say, famous, characteristic ecstasies of a devotee on the level of bhava. Or we could say they really start in significant ways when a devotee comes to the level of bhava, either through Vaidhi sadhana bhakti or through Raganuga sadhana bhakti. So there are these then, famous emotional symptoms. And therefore, when we hear about the characteristics or the symptoms, the character of one in ecstatic love, bhava, as the chapter is titled, then the natural response may be to expect this sort of description. But this is not the description we get at all. Here in this chapter 18, well, certainly there are 9 very specific characteristics listed out and then elaborated upon right from the beginning of this chapter. But pretty much they appear on the surface to be more like sort of general characteristics of a devotee, of a good devotee. They don't seem to be like that ecstatic, emotional, outpouring, something of that sort, which would generally be quite different from your, so to speak, regular devotees. Most of these characteristics, which we'll read just now, they sound pretty much like regular characteristics or symptoms of a good devotee, very serious devotee, very committed who's really trying to progress in Krishna consciousness. And of course they are that. But when they become very developed and prominent, then they are characteristics or symptoms of a devotee on the level of bhava. So let's just read the list as it appears here in Nectar of Devotion. There is a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, but let's just focus on the description here in Nectar of Devotion. So number one, the devotee on the level of bhava is always anxious to utilize his time in the devotional service of the Lord. He does not like to be idle. He wants service always, 24 hours a day, without deviation. This is a very prominent, they're all prominent, they're all important, but this is a very prominent symptom of a devotee on the level of bhava. And then number two, we'll explain a bit or read the descriptions or like that of each one as we go through the chapter in a minute or two or so. So number two, always reserved and perseverant. Always reserved and perseverant. You know, what that means, what the idea is, well, anyway, okay. As we go through, we'll see. Number three, always detached from all material attraction. Means, well, always detached from all material attraction. Means very detached. Number four, does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. Or you could sort of translate that. You could say, very humble, very humble. Number five, always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. Number six, always very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. Number seven, very much attached to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. 8, always eager to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. And 9, very pleased to live in a place where the Lord's pastimes are performed. For example, Mathura, Vrindavan, Dwaraka, the Radharanath temple in Durban. Anyway, sacred places of the Lord where the Lord is present. Okay, so that's the list. That's the list. And let me just make a comment about these. Like we said, and I'm sure you've seen quite clearly, these are not really emotional, ecstatic manifestations like the crying, fainting, things like this, which are generally understood to be just essential parts and parcels of bhava, the ecstatic experience of bhava. But certainly in their developed forms, when they're very strongly present in a devotee, they are symptoms of bhava. and they're extremely important symptoms. And there is a very important reason why they're very important symptoms. That is because, unfortunately, you do get not exactly in Krishna consciousness, because they're not really Krishna conscious people, but sort of on the periphery, around the margins of Krishna consciousness, you do get people who, for whatever reason, there can be different reasons, but whatever, they have their reasons, they would like to be recognized and glorified, and even more than that they would like to get followings and become famous and possibly earn nicely, all these different types of material benefits they would like through being recognized as apparently a great devotee. For that reason, and then you get those who are impersonalists also, but for whatever reason, they are trying to put on a show, really, of advanced Krishna consciousness. I remember the first time in Bhaktivedanta Manna that I saw it happen, that one man came in dressed in, dhoti kurta, which in terms of the general public is not so common in England. But there he was with some blob spot on his head, and yes, he looked like some sort of perhaps devotee or person who's religiously minded at least. So he came in front of the deities, and with a small group of people, perhaps 4 or 5 others, and suddenly, then he was there, and he was very sort of, a bit on the intense side. Suddenly, bang, he just collapsed on the ground, and we didn't know what's going on, and he was crying. But it was, after a while he just got up and walked away. I remember once in Vrindavan in the Krishna Balaram temple, a whole group of Bengali pilgrims came. There were probably at least 30, something like that. There may well have been some more. And they were mainly old people, older, sort of at least 50s, 60s, and some older. There were a handful, 2 or 3 or 4, like children or youths, teenagers. And they're all dressed up in devotional ways, and they came in, and it was the evening arti in the Krishna Balaram temple. So there they were, and the kirtan, everything's going on. And suddenly, the leader, I was actually watching. I saw the leader gave a signal, yeah. It was clearly a signal. Everyone was watching him. And then signal came, and suddenly at least 30 people hit the deck, hit the floor, and started rolling. And if you're familiar with the Krishna Balaram temple, they were rolling across from like where Tulsi is to where Prabhupada is and back. It was a bit of a spectacle. And there were these 2 young, like teenage boys, and they were hesitant. Everyone else, had already started rolling about, say, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds before. They were like, they're watching and like, well, should we, or what should we do? And then one of the boys went to the other. He just went, right, right, another sign. And they hit the deck also and started rolling. And we had to kind of clear out, or else we had to jump over the people or risk, falling on them or something, because it was just a bit way out. And so this went on for not a long time. I don't know if it was a minute, but it was just some not so long time. And then they all got up and walked out. Haribol. And they were gone. So, and I could tell you a few stories. We've had a number of experiences, actually. So, so the thing is, the problem is that these emotional symptoms can easily be imitated. Even crying. If someone really wants to, they can force themselves to cry. But other things like falling on the ground, rolling, moaning and groaning, and this sort of thing, that's easy to do. Anyone can do that. So in other words, to imitate these emotional symptoms of bhava, it's not too difficult. It's really not too difficult. But to imitate these symptoms, that is something else. Without actual spiritual advancement, one will not be able to do these. At least one will not be able to do these for long. And certainly one will not be able to do all of these for a long time. Maybe one can make a bit of a show for a while, but like, a few days or something, but not all of them, all of the time, and just on a completely ongoing basis. So therefore, these are very important symptoms of advanced Krishna consciousness, of bhava. And therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, they've placed this list here, whereas the emotional symptoms, they form the greater part, actually, of the southern side of the ocean of nectar, which is the next section from chapter 20 to, if I remember correctly, it's 34. It's 34 or 35 chapter, which we've done. We've done seminars on, actually, in depth. We've done in-depth seminars on that whole section. Yeah. And there, all these things, the emotional symptoms, all different types. All different types. And many, they are definitely described there. But these are more essential for getting the basic idea, what is bhava. Because this, we only have 2 chapters, yesterday's chapter and this chapter about bhava, and only 1 chapter tomorrow about prema. Why so little? Because they're just introductions, simple introductions. Whereas the entire rest of Nectar of Devotion is simply focusing on bhava and prema. That's all. The discussion on sadhana bhakti is over. It's already been done. So for the rest of Nectar of Devotion, it's only bhava and prema. Okay, so let us now run through these 9 characteristics, symptoms, important symptoms of bhava. So number 1 was utilization of time. And like, as an example, Srila Prabhupada, he utilized his time so amazingly in Krishna's service. He would rest twice a day usually. At night, he'd rest for maybe 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. And normally he'd get up maybe around 2. He'd take rest late, like 11 o'clock or so, get up maybe 2, and translate. Then after lunch in the afternoon, he would often or generally, but not always, take rest again for an hour, or maybe 2. So if you added it all up, it was kind of averaging out like 3 or 4, maybe around 4 hours, or 3 to 4 hours, and utilizing his time so much in Krishna's service. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the same. I don't have right here with me the details of how he did that, but it was something like what Srila Prabhupada did, taking rest for a couple of hours at night, getting up in the early morning, or maybe even, around midnight, and translating and doing different things. Like that, such a program. So, because time is so valuable. Chanakya Pandit says, and Srila Prabhupada referred to that quotation on a number of occasions, that if you waste, time is so valuable, if you waste 1 second, you cannot get it back, buy it back for all the money in the world. You cannot buy it back. 1 second, so valuable. It's even, in a sense, it's a type of form of the Lord. And Krishna makes that point in Bhagavad Gita when Arjuna, in the 11th chapter, the universal form chapter, Arjuna asks Krishna, having seen the universal form and just been so totally astonished, Arjuna asks Krishna, please tell me, who are you and what is your mission? Because he thought, he's my relative, my friend. And then I saw, wow, look at this. He is something else altogether. And Krishna answered, Kalosmi, lokakshaya krit pravriddha. I am time. And my mission, what's my mission? I've come to destroy everyone, except you Pandavas. Okay, so that's a point there. And in that regard, I remember when I first joined, when I first joined, ISKCON was different from what it is now in a number of significant ways. One way was there was a lot more fanaticism. There was a lot more. There was, when I moved into the temple, there's however many, 50, 60 devotees, plus or minus, not less than 50. But there was a few of them who had their special programs for spiritual advancement. And at least 1 or 2 had the program that I am not this body, therefore I do not need to sleep. or at least I can minimize my sleeping in the extreme. And so we had these devotees sleeping 2 hours a night, and that's all. And whenever they'd sit down for anything, even prasadam, they'd fall asleep. It was just like clockwork, you know. Oh yeah. So you can imitate, and you can probably manage it for a couple of days, a few days or something. But after a while, it'll catch up with you. And before you know, you'll just be asleep. You won't have to lie down. You'll just find that you're asleep. So that's a very important symptom. We have a special question here for the Bhakti Shastri. Well, what's this? Okay, anyway. A devotee must be very alert, what not to do. Oh, I see. They're referring to this Chaitanya Charitamrita verse. But anyway, that's all right. We've just emphasized it here. What must a devotee be very alert not to do? Well, to not waste a second of his or her time. That's the answer. You'll get a question, what must a devotee be alert not to do? The answer is not to waste even a second of time. Next characteristic is perseverance. Perseverance. In other words, the advanced devotee on the level of bhava is unstoppable. No challenge is so big that the devotee becomes deterred and gives up, becomes depressed. No, the devotee carries on at the lotus feet of Krishna. And here we see Prabhupada gives the example, and Rupa Goswami, of Maharaj Parikshit, first canto, 19th chapter, where he speaks to Shukadev. Shukadev Goswami has not appeared on the scene quite. In a verse or two, couple of verses, he's going to appear. But at this point, he hasn't appeared. And Maharaj Parikshit, he's going to die in not more than 7 days. I mean, he already used a bit of time to come down to the river and get settled in there. So he's going to die. He's definitely going to die. He knows it very well. But he didn't panic. He didn't panic. So what did he do? Many devotees, sages gathered, and he asked them, "My dear Brahmins, you should always accept me as your surrendered servant. I've come to the bank of the Ganges just to devote my heart and soul unto the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. So please bless me, that Mother Ganges may also be pleased with me. Let the curse of the Brahmin's son fall upon me. I do not mind. I only request that at the last moment of my life, all of you will kindly chant the holy name of Vishnu, so that I may realize his transcendental qualities." Yeah. Just go on. Whatever happens, just go on glorifying the Lord. That's all. So this is a perseverant mood. And Prabhupada was like that. Srila Prabhupada, you know one thing Prabhupada said? Prabhupada said, my God brothers did practically whatever they could to depress me and put me off. They did practically whatever they could to distress me, depress me, repress me. He mentions a few terms, actually. But I did not let them affect me. I carried on in my service to my Guru Maharaj. Yes, I've got that verse somewhere. Anyway, some other time. Okay, so that level of perseverance despite obstacles, just unstoppability. This can only be present in a person who is highly advanced. Actually, beyond the modes of nature means at least on the level of bhava. So number 3 is detachment. And this is the one, if you remember, when we were in chapter 13, where the 5 very important processes were elaborated upon, and both the process of deity worship and the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam were glorified by Srila Rupa Goswami. He wrote specific verses to illustrate them, and if you remember, the point he made in both cases was that if you see the deity, or if you hear Srimad Bhagavatam, you are going to become totally detached from your family, friendship, material love, all these things. So you remember, I think, don't look at Radha Govinda. Don't do it. Because we know how, not yourselves, but, those people, we know how attached you are to your family, friends, and all these things. We know. So don't look at Radha Govinda, because if you do, you'll lose all of that. It'll just be gone, and you won't be able to go back to them. They may come running after you, but you'll just, no longer. So that we said, and this similar idea in regard to hearing the Bhagavatam in principle. And the point which we made was that the thing is, if you do these things, then you may immediately come to the level of bhava, one of the symptoms of which is this extreme detachment. Extreme. The Sanskrit term is virakti, extreme detachment. Not just, like many of us, we can follow the regulative principles. Yeah, it's okay. None of us have thought about drinking some liquor or anything like that. But that's not quite the extreme detachment. Yeah, where one becomes completely removed from these things altogether. And the example given here is of Maharaj Bharat. And he, as in the first of the 2 paragraphs here, under detachment, as it says, he was so attracted by the beauty of the lotus feet of Krishna that even in his youthful life, he gave up all kinds of attachments to family, children, friends, kingdom, etc., as though they were untouchable stools. Hare Krishna. Yeah, it gives you the idea, doesn't it? Extreme detachment. Yeah. Of course, he had some problems later on, but that's another thing. And that's just a whole other story, actually. But at this point, Bharat Maharaj, he was on the level of bhava, and therefore he exhibited this extreme detachment. And then pridelessness or humility. King Bhagirat was he was the emperor, but he became a mendicant. And then in the second paragraph, Prabhupada mentions Lal Babu from a couple of 100 years ago in Calcutta, who had been a landlord, very wealthy in Calcutta. And he was a very ruthless businessman. And he cheated many people terribly. He was just a hopelessly horrible person. But then he became a devotee. And when he became a devotee, in order to help cleanse himself from the attitude that he'd had before, that aggressive, cheating, nasty, proud attitude, as a sadhana, he adopted the practice of begging from door to door, and even specifically going to the houses of people who he had cheated and ripped off and just abused terribly, and begging from them. And elsewhere, so Prabhupada mentions a bit here, but elsewhere there's a class, Prabhupada talks about Lal Babu a bit more, and his humility. And there, Srila Prabhupada tells the story of how Lal Babu one time, as part of the sadhana for his purification and self-improvement, he went to the house of one of these, another wealthy person who he had cheated very badly. I mean, he cheated anyone. But, particularly these big wealthy people, they don't like to be cheated. So he went to the house of one of them who he had cheated very badly. And he knocked on the door, and the man came to the door. And Lal Babu said, "You remember me? I'm Lal Babu. I cheated you before." And the man said, "Yes, I remember you." And Lal Babu said, as you can see, because he's wearing like Babaji clothes, he said, "As you can see, I've become a devotee. I've given up all these things. So now I've come to you, and I want to beg some charity from you. Please give me something. Give me a donation." And the man was really taken aback. And the man said, "All right, I'll give you something." So the man went back inside the house. Lal Babu's at the door. And they had a wood-burning stove. The man opened up the stove, took out ashes from where they'd been cooking the night before, or that morning or whatever. He took out some of the ashes, put them in a bucket, came back to the front door, and poured them over the head of Lal Babu, and said, "See, I told you I'd give you a donation. There you go." And Lal Babu, because that man, the other man, was also, sort of the same style of person. He was a mean businessman who would never give anyone anything, even if their life depended on it. He wouldn't give you one paisa. And Lal Babu, now covered in ashes, said, "Thank you. At least you have started giving." So, now if you look it up, you can probably find it somewhere. Okay, now next, it's called here Great Hope, number 5. Okay, in our list, it was called, He's always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. So, okay, that's all right. So, it's a good one, actually. Yes, the Sanskrit is called Ashabandha, and Asha does mean hope or desire. Yeah. So Prabhupada says, Ashabandha means to continue to think that because I'm trying my best to follow the routine principles of devotional service, I'm sure that I'll go back to Godhead, back to home. But then in the following paragraph, Prabhupada gives it's a really amazing verse written by Rupa Goswami specifically to illustrate this hopefulness. So he says, I have no love for Krishna, nor for the causes of developing love for Krishna, namely hearing and chanting. And the process of bhakti yoga, by which one is always thinking of Krishna and fixing his lotus feet in the heart, is also lacking in me. As far as philosophical knowledge or pious works are concerned, I don't see any opportunity for me to execute such activities. But above all, I'm not even born of a good family. Therefore, I must simply pray to you, Gopijana Vallabha, Krishna, who's the maintainer and beloved of the gopis. I simply wish and hope that some way or other I may be able to approach your lotus feet, and this hope is giving me pain, because I think myself quite incompetent to approach that transcendental goal of life. So, in other words, one should hope against hope. One should try one's best too, but one should also hope against hope that I'll be able to approach the lotus feet of the Lord. Number 6 is eagerness for achieving the desired success. It's called samutkanta, which means complete eagerness. And Prabhupada says, actually, this eagerness is the price for achieving success in Krishna consciousness. Everything has some value, and one has to pay the value before you can get it. So to get the most valuable thing, Krishna consciousness, one has to be extremely eager, for achieving success. Then attachment to chanting the holy names, that Radharani was separated from Krishna, and what was she doing? Shedding tears and anxiously chanting Krishna's holy names. Here's a special question in this regard. It's from, note this down, write it down. Chaitanya Charitamrita, Antya Leela, chapter 1, verse 99. I do not know how much nectar the 2 syllables Krishna have produced. When the holy name of Krishna is chanted, it appears to dance within the mouth. We then desire many, many mouths. When that name enters the holes of the ears, we desire many millions of ears. And when the holy name dances in the courtyard of the heart, it conquers the activities of the mind, and all the senses become inert. This is bhava. This is chanting of the holy names on the level of bhava, at least on the level of bhava. Antya Leela, chapter 1, verse 99, and that's the question. What is the verse number? So note it down if you're doing Bhakti Shastri. So number 8, eagerness to describe the Lord's transcendental qualities. Yes. What shall I do for Krishna, who is pleasing beyond all pleasurable conceptions, and who is naughtier than all restless boys? The idea of Krishna's beautiful activities is attracting my heart, and I do not know what I can do. Yes, eager to glorify the Lord's qualities, pastimes, and just how wonderful is the Lord in so many ways. And there is a special question about this too. And the verse is Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila, chapter 21, verse 10. Madhya Lila 21, 10. Note it down, which says, the spiritual qualities of Krishna are also unlimited. Great personalities like Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the 4 Kamas cannot estimate the spiritual qualities of the Lord. Okay. So what must you do here? You must know who are the great personalities who cannot estimate the qualities of the Lord. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the 4 Kumars. We must carry on. We have to keep moving. So finally, number 9 is attraction for living in a place where Krishna has his pastimes. And Rupa Goswami in Padyavali gives the statement from one devotee. I don't know if it's from him or from someone else. One devotee is moving around the Vrindavan area, visiting the places. In this place, the son of Nanda Maharaj used to live with his father, who was king of all cowherd men. In this place, Krishna broke the cart in which the Shakatasura demon was concealed. At this place, Damodar, who can cut the knot of our material existence, was tied up by his mother Yashoda. So in other words, very attracted to these places where the Lord had his or has his pastimes. So we should visit those places. So now the rest of the chapter is devoted to a particular subject, which, anyway, we'll just make mention of it. We won't go into it in so much depth. But the point is that sometimes either neophyte devotees, like real neophytes, or even sometimes non-devotees, may display ecstatic symptoms. Of course, some of them we already mentioned, they may imitate for their different agendas. But some of them, they actually manifest different symptoms of ecstasy, not imitating. So what is going on there? This is the question. So, there's impersonalists, Sri Radha Radhanath, Sri Giri Govardhan, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So anyway, it's a bit of a section here. It's about 11 or maybe 12 paragraphs but we're not going to go through the whole thing. It includes basically whoever, impersonalists, neophytes, non-devotees, imitators. An important point, though, is that there are two types of this. It is called Rati Abbas. Rati Abbas. Abbas can mean a reflection or a shadow, like that. Some people may get, by association with great devotees, the love of the great devotees may be reflected into them, and so they may display some elevated symptoms, either by imitation or just because of the influence of the great devotees. For example, the person may associate with devotees when they chant, and then the rays from the hearts of the devotees into their hearts. Someone may visit a holy place, and the potency of the holy place may affect them. So yeah, there's shadow attachment or chaya, or reflected attachment, pratibimba. Pratibimba. Now, usually what happens is after some little time, those symptoms either reduce or disappear. And the devotee, the person, may, if they stay in Krishna consciousness, they may become more like regular devotees, or they may just go away and just go back into material life. Because actually, we're talking about people who are basically deeply materially conditioned. What to speak of the impersonalist or a materialist, but even a very neophyte devotee is deeply materially attached. Of course, if it's a neophyte devotee, there's a greater chance they'll continue. Yeah, but the person may not continue. In many cases, they don't. And what is the main reason for that? Which, as explained here, the main reason is because they're so conditioned, or they're impersonal, or they're both, or they just don't know what they're doing. They'll commit offenses. They won't understand what they're doing, and they'll commit offenses. And if you commit offenses, particularly against devotees, and if you commit offenses particularly against elevated devotees, pure devotees, your devotional creeper is going to become severely affected. Yes. So, yeah, of the two reflected pratibimba or shadow, chaya, pratibimba is higher. Pratibimba, the reflected, because a reflection of a person is more substantial than the shadow of a person. We've got our special mirrored windows here. I'm sure, how many times have you looked at yourself in the mirror? I'm sure it's plenty of times, if nothing else, just spontaneously. So a reflection looks like you, but your shadow, it's not so clear at all. It's really not so clear at all. Anytime you see your reflection, you know whose reflection it is. But shadow, recognize your own shadow, how it may be different from other people's shadows. You can't really do that. So those who are on the level of chaya, the shadow attachment, that part of rati abhava, or rati is a synonym for bhava. So you can also, rati abhas, you can also say bhava abhas. So if a person is just on the shadow level and they commit offenses, they won't last. If someone is on the level of pratibimba, the reflection, and they commit offenses, they'll come down to the shadow level where their position will become quite, sort of delicate and unstable. Yeah. So Prabhupada says, if the offense is very serious, then one's attachment becomes almost nil. And if the offense is not very serious, one's attachment can become second class or third class. Hare Krishna. Okay, and then, if you want to go into it, you can read through those paragraphs. In the last two paragraphs, 20 and 21, here there's talk about a neophyte or a somewhat more advanced devotee, but they commit offenses in the second to last and last paragraph. And Prabhupada refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 30. Somehow or other, these devotees may commit some offense, and then their devotion will go down even drastically. But Prabhupada, referring to Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, verse 30, says that we should not be envious of such a devotee. As long as they stick to the process, even if they do something which is really not good, but Krishna will help them. These abominable activities will surely be very soon vanquished by influence of the devotee's staunch devotional service. And the example is given, Prabhupada gives the example of the moon. The moon, if you look at the full moon, there's a famous pastime of Radha and Krishna, where Krishna tells Radharani, it's a full moon, and Krishna's trying to think what to say to glorify Radharani to please her. And he sees the moon and he says, yes, your face is just like the full moon. And Radharani looks at the full moon and sees it has spots and gets angry. So for a staunch, normally like a serious committed devotee, if somehow they make some offense and they come down to a lower stage, we shouldn't be envious of them, because their position may be something like the full moon, that they're devotees, and these, whatever faults they have, they may be just like spots on the moon. So the moon is still very wonderful. So we shouldn't be envious of devotees who get into these situations. But this is talking about devotees. It's not talking about the impersonalists and materialists who may somehow manifest some some apparently advanced Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada says, similarly, a little fault in the midst of volumes of devotional service is not at all to be counted as a fault. Attachment for Krishna consciousness is transcendental bliss. Amid unlimited volumes of transcendental bliss, a spot of some material defect cannot act in any way. Hare Krishna. So there you go, devotees. Tomorrow we'll go into the 19th chapter, Krishna Prema, and as you've noticed, we haven't had time to discuss those bhavas, but if we have time tomorrow, we'll do it. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Hare Krishna.